Welcome to Mystara, where today we are piecing together a mystery. That being, what is Taymora? This nation was first introduced as ruins in the creature crucible Sea Peoples, where we learned very little about it. At least we thought we did, as Mystara fans are rather thorough in their breakdown of the setting. So like archaeologists, we started piecing together what was known from just the snippets by cross-referencing Sea Peoples with the history of every timeline that could be applied to the region. And this is what we know based on what we were given. I'm Mr. Welch. It's time to grab your whip and your fedora. For starters, nothing of surface Taymora remains. It is completely sank beneath the surface during a time of geological upheaval known as the Primal Chaos, which has been hinted at multiple source books but never officially talked about. In short, the Immortals had a tiff around 2000 BC and the surface of the world changed. Behind the scenes, it was an excuse to explain why the map of Mystara looks nothing like the map of Blackmoor. Because Immortals did it. Taymora was located south of where Karamikos and the Five Shires met, though how far south the nation extended can only be speculated based on what we know. When the chaos hit, all of Taymora sank beneath the ocean, while Minrathad went from an island to an archipelago. The nation, chronologically, is located in a very eventful period of time. The destruction of Taymora occurred 1500 years after the Great Rain of Fire, and 250 years before the rise of Nithia. The future elves of Minrathad were just beginning to migrate into the land that would become their homeland. The jackal-headed Hatakans still rule what would become Traldar, as the humans haven't arrived yet. Nithia hasn't even begun to emerge yet, and as Nithia is considered the first empire after Blackmoor, we know Taymora didn't play rough with their neighbors. This does give us a general idea of how big the nation was, based on its neighbors and who was arriving where at the time. The locations of the ruin gives us a greater picture of how the continent of Brune used to be, as Taymoran ruins have been found 500 miles south of the continent, meaning that Minrathad and Irindi used to be part of the mainland. This time of upheaval was called the Elemental Chaos, as Immortals fought for control after the destruction of Blackmoor left a massive power vacuum in their ranks. Immortals that lost all their followers in the Great Rain of Fire blinked out of existence. An unknown but sizable amount of Immortals were lost in this way, so the up-and-comers tried to grab what influence they could and reshape the world. The Elemental Chaos started in 2000 BC. Despite having the same name, this period of great geological upheaval is not connected at all with the 5e retconning of the elemental planes. The chaos was started as a dispute between unnamed immortals, and from the world-spanning nature of the chaos, it was probably several immortals. Large portions of the map were changed. New lands emerged. Old lands sank beneath the ocean. The map was rewritten on the fly. Several nations broke away from the mainland and became islands. Taymora was utterly destroyed, the nation being claimed by the sea. All their surface territory was destroyed by a series of great earthquakes that took over 300 years. Only a trace of Taymora can be found underwater in the nation of Aqua-Rindi. But not all Taymorans died in the chaos. Several hundred were able to flee to safer ground. The few survivors scattered into various human lands or settled on the Minrathad Islands. But their culture was doomed because of their few numbers, and over the centuries the Taymoran survivors interbred with their neighbors until nothing remained of their race or their culture in any recognizable form. Most of the Taymorans went east, where they met with the Traldar people who took in the few survivors. Technologically, the Taymorans were firmly in the Bronze Age, based on the artifacts that remain. They hadn't discovered how to work iron or steel yet, but they did have a large economy based on agriculture. They used metal tools and weapons, but weren't quite up to the level of the ancient Greeks in terms of development. Most of Taymora appeared to be farmlands. They did have a few cities, but all but one have largely been lost to time. There is a chance that the Taymorans were a confederation of city-states with little in the way of organization outside of a mutual alliance. Taymora thrived during this time, largely due to a lack of organized opposition. They were trading partners with the elves that surrounded the Meditor and Vertiger elves of future Minrathad. The Hen hadn't arrived yet, so the land that would be the Shires was occupied by the Gentlefolk, who were obviously no threat. The Beastmen were becoming the humanoids around this exact time, but they weren't as widespread just yet. The Hatakans were content in their little pocket empire, and Nithia wouldn't arrive on the scenes for a few centuries. Again, we know Taymora wasn't imperialistic, so their borders were secure. From the ruins found in Aqua-Rindi, we do know the Taymoran culture physically resembled the ancient Greeks, but any similarity to the Millennian Empire is probably just coincidental, as the Millennians were still centuries away from developing on Devania. If you want to go with a real-world civilization for them to resemble, Phoenicia is a good choice. They traded extensively with the elves and the few human cultures found in the region, with a large number of their cities on the coast. Their interior regions would have been used for agriculture, and from the murals found in the ruins, the Taymorans had domesticated a large number of animals for food and work. As far as their religion, little is known of who their immortals were, save a few. The patron of devilfish, Saskas, is known for having interfered with Taymoran society, at least near the end of the nation. She had several priests on land that worshipped her and promoted the use of necromancy. When the nation fell, she animated as much of their dead as she could, and her followers still dominate large portions of the ruined parts of Taymora. Saturnius is a little-known immortal who today serves as the patron of pirates, but he was originally of Taymoran stock and is credited with saving the lives of hundreds of his countrymen during the elemental chaos. However, Saturnius was only worshipped by the few Taymorans left after he ascended. Orcus, lord of lycanthropes, and no relation to that pretender demon over in the abyss, was originally Origuz, a Taymoran warlord of great cruelty. He left Taymora for Traldar somewhere around 1800 BC, where he carved a bloody path that eventually earned him immortality. Like Saturnius, he was never worshipped in Taymora, but was just an immortal of Taymoran heritage. Of the immortals they actually worshipped, nothing is really known. One problem that is known to have plagued Taymora is that of necromancy. This was probably due in part to the influences of Saskas, as that's part of her sphere of influence. What can be garnered from the information given is that necromancy was a part of Taymoran culture, though not everybody approved of it. Why they made heavy use of necromancy is not explained, and if you go with the city-states theory, then it might not have been used as heavily depending on the city. They could have just not had the same cultural opposition to necromancy as other societies. Instead of slaves, they could have had skeletons tilling their fields. Peasants could sell the rights to their bodies after death to the necromancers, similar to the dustmen of Planescape. We know Taymorans had at least a few wizards of considerable power, as there were numerous artifacts found in the ruins there, and at least one future immortal, in the form of Brinderhorn, used a Taymoran artifact during his quest for immortality. One question still lingers about the destruction of Taymora. Why wasn't it preserved in the Hollow World? The obvious answer that it predated the creation of the Hollow World, but there are entire Beastmen societies and Neanderthals preserved. The obvious answer is that the Hollow World and the Sea Peoples were developed separately of each other, so Jim Bambra and Aaron Alston never collaborated to include Taymora in the Hollow World. Both products were released in 1990, and as everybody knows, Mystara was not known for its writers talking to each other for continuity's sake. But if you want a lore-friendly explanation, blame it on the elemental chaos. During this period of feuding immortals, numerous cultures could have been destroyed before Ka and his allies could have saved them, either through interference by rivals or by the sudden destruction of the people. Of course, since it took Taymora 300 years to finally be destroyed, that theory's got a lot of holes in it. Or maybe Taymora is in the Hollow World, but in a remote region away from the primary lands, and it's still waiting to be discovered. There are a lot of articles on Taymora in the Vaults of Pandius speculating on what became of them or what their culture was like. From what those authors surmised, Taymorans were Mediterranean appearance with dark hair, olive skin, and about average height. Where they originated from exactly is unknown, but it is said to be in the north, though up until several centuries before that it would have been part of the Arctic. Still, it's never said exactly how far they migrated, so it might not have been that great of a distance. There's probably a good deal of knowledge, possibly saved by the elves of Minrithad, about their trading partners, as Taymora is only a few generations ago for them. If the characters want to know more about Taymora, the only place they're going to find information is underwater. The largest Taymoran city to remain intact is Tamaraz, but that's found near Devilfish territory in the Abyss, the underwater abyss that separates the continental shelf of Brune with the Isle of Dread's continental plate, not the place where the demons hang out. The demons already got enough problems with a bunch of vampire manta rays showing up anyways. Tamaraz is where you are going to find a large number of intact buildings, especially the Great Temple. Who the temple was devoted to originally is lost to time, as it's been taken over by Saskas in the centuries that followed. The temple is surrounded by various other buildings, but finding things that haven't been looted over the centuries might be tough. There's quite a few adventure hooks for the ruins of Taymora, both above and below ground. If some random scribe in Minrithad finds an ancient scroll talking about the Great Bank of Taymora that sank intact 1,000 years ago, there's probably some merchant prince willing to hire adventurers to check it out. It's possible, but not likely, to find Taymoran artifacts in Karamikos or the island nations. That could lead to greater adventure to find out the source of these artifacts. The knowledge of Taymora isn't commonplace, even in the great centers of learning. It's a footnote in the history of the region. Most people don't even know about the elemental chaos because it happened so long ago. Taymora was a largely pastoral nation, with the cities located on the now underwater coast. All their libraries and temples are long destroyed, so any scrolls and tapestries are gone. To make matters worse for finding any information out about the country, it existed long before any of the modern nations, so no one's going to have a record of them except possibly Minrithad. The undersea nation of Aqua Rendi knows the most about Taymora, at least regarding its buildings and artifacts, but almost nothing of its people. The problem with going to Aqua Rendi for research is, aside from the fact it's underwater, is most of the Taymoran cities lie in hostile areas, near Sharkkin or Devilfish regions. To make matters worse, most of the Taymoran dead were turned into undead by clerics of Saskas, meaning the ancient ruins are swarming with all sorts of fell creatures. That's Taymora and everything we know about it. There wasn't much, but what they did tell us gave us a glimpse into the world that was, between Blackmoor and the known world. Make of it what you will. Next week I'm going to show you a trick Mother showed me when you weren't around. we are looking at magical dueling in Mystara. But until then, remember to wait 30 minutes after eating before going into the water.